With me today is Dr. Eric Fete, founder of Relentless Vitality. And Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm anxious to get into this a little bit. As we were talking offline, I'm in my mid 40s, and an area of men's health seems to be an area that is under discussed, at least from my seat. It seems, women's health, and appropriately so, they seem to go through a lot more internal chemistry than we do generally. But at our age, you start to see some things start to change a little bit. And I don't know if it's manopause or what. But anyway, looking forward to kind of digging into this discussion and how we can kind of push up against that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. No, you're spot on. And actually, they call it andropause, I think. Is kind of the male version of menopause. So I like what you said though. That sounds better.
So before we jump into kind of what you're doing in your practice, and you quoted yourself as, you like to call yourself the fitness physician. What's your background? Like, kind of how did you get to the practice and your kind of narrative to medicine?
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. So, my current thing is I'm Dr. Eric Primex is the website. DrEricPrimex.com, and my tagline is, the fitness physician. So I'm all about like hormonal fitness and muscle medicine, dealing mostly with hormone optimization, peptide therapies, basically longevity, age management, quote unquote, anti-aging, et cetera. So all under the big umbrella of preventive medicine, preventive health. So I'm trying to treat things on the front end. So the way I got into that was kind of I was originally on the back end, what we call the kind of the back end sick care model. Unfortunately, I was originally, when my original training was in emergency medicine. So I was an ER doctor for many years, and I saw, people at their worst, they're broken, damaged, dying, had to do all kinds of crazy stuff, just like on the TV show, right? So,
right.
And I loved it. It was fun. I loved the medicine. I loved helping people and saving lives and things. And I mean, it was great. But the downside is I'd see a lot of, unfortunately, sad cases where, say someone like our age who was already on, 20 medications, overweight, already had a heart attack because his cholesterol, his blood pressure, he's diabetic, he's just a mess. And I'm like, God, this could have been prevented with better, lifestyle choices. And I'm thinking,
right,
gotta be a way to fix this, as opposed to coming in now. Yeah, I can maybe fix you for now, but you're going to die early. You're going to have a terrible quality of life. So that kind of got me into the front end side of preventing that. And that's how I got into kind of, at the time, was called like anti-aging or age management medicine. Interventional endocrinology has a lot of different names, but functional medicine, all these different things. So basically by optimizing lifestyle, nutrition, what I call the gears. I like the gears. If your body's a machine, think of the gears that kind of turn that machine. You have nutrition and lifestyle, you have fitness, you have hormones, and you have supplementation, nutritional deficiencies. They all have to be kind of gelling together for that machine, for those wheels to turn, right? So if one is off, then it may be going, but it may not be going optimally. You may be stuck in third gear, right? So that's how I got into that. So, and that's what my patients come to me for. They're fatigue and gaining weight, can't lose weight, losing muscle, their libido's down, etc. So that's what I fix. And if I can catch it early, I can shave not just years off their life, but not only a lifespan, but a health span, right? They can live better, stronger, more energetic, more virile, more vibrant, and not have to become diabetic, not have to get a heart attack or osteoporosis and falls and all these things that can be prevented. And it's just not only a health perspective, but saving them time and money and as well. And that's pretty cool. So that's kind of what took me that way. So
awesome. That's great. Yeah. I mean, you touched on so many different things. So start with, where do you see it most? You mentioned, mid 40s and people like our age that are heavy already into a variety of medications. And thankfully, for a number of things on pharmacology is good, but there's also some negative side effects, as we know, to some of those things. From a preventive side, what's the best right action for someone to start taking?
Yeah, I think, and that's a big question and a great question. I think, the things that I'm seeing that we used to see in people in their, 60s and 70s, unfortunately, we're seeing it in people in their, 40s, 30s, and 30s, some occasionally in the 20s, because of various same lifestyle choices. Unfortunately, we live in a very toxic environment with, pollution and all the crap in our food and the water and the plastics and Roundup and just, stress lack of sleep because of our go society, all these things, it takes its toll. So man, there's a million ways to attack it, but I always sit down and spend a lot of time with the patient trying to figure out, what's their kryptonite, right? If they're Superman, what's triggering that. And sometimes a lot of times it's many things, but
Yeah.
of attacking it, I try to start with the easy, free things first, right? Like, let's get you sleeping better. Let's reduce your stress. Maybe that might be something as simple as, turning off the iPad at night and wearing some blue blocker glasses, or taking a hot bath and just taking some deep breathing or meditation or whatever. Just, I always start with lifestyle because that's usually free, usually we're cheap. And then we work on nutrition and fitness. And then of course we work our way up to other things, nutritional deficiencies. People have gut issues, very prevalent in today's society, again, with all
Yeah.
the foods and processed foods and toxins. And of course the hormones are paramount. And oftentimes these things, I'll tackle many things at once. But I always talk about the two S's, right? Sleep and stress. Those are the two ones. Until you correct that, I mean, I can have the magic pill and it's not going to help if you're not sleeping or you're stressed out all the time. So we have to address that first.
Yeah, because I mean that's the genesis of this podcast and the origination of it. But yeah, the sleep piece and the ability to stress manage, because that wreaks so much havoc on your system, to be able to absorb the very nutrients you're trying to absorb
Oh
or
yeah,
take in. Because like you can eat the right things, but it still doesn't mean it's getting into your system the right way.
that's a great point. A lot of people do have like gut issues. They're so problem. I mean, I've dealt with that myself where, yeah, you think you're eating everything, but you're not absorbing it. For example, me specifically, I had an issue a while back where my iron levels were low. I was eating tons of meat and this and that, but I just wasn't absorbing it. People have what they call leaky gut or different, all these autoimmune conditions, and because of gut issues, we're finding more and more, a lot of these conditions are related to the gut and leaking what we call endotoxins. Toxins from bacteria or overgrowth, and they're leaking into the rest of their body, in the brain and the heart. So, and you add to that, you mentioned, with you, the rest and recovery podcast, rest, recovery, right? People are, slamming, they're going to the Orange Theory or doing HIIT workouts, 7 days a week. They're like, I'm not losing weight. I'm going to hit it harder, harder, harder. And they're just wearing themselves down. Their stress,
Yeah.
cortisol levels are through the roof. Their gut's actually getting worse. Everything's getting worse. So at some point you got to go, whoa, back off, let's recover and let our body heal, and change some things. So that's huge. A lot of people have taken off really low calorie diets and said, look, stop. You're going to be mad at me, but I don't want you to work out this week. I want you to eat more and do less. And they kind of look at me like I'm crazy. And then, 2 weeks later, they'll call me like, oh my God, I feel better. I actually lost 4 pounds and, I feel energized. I'm sleeping better. I'm like, yeah, you got to let your body do its thing. So
Yeah, exactly. So, at what point, like, would you recommend folks paying attention? I mean, we're kind of targeting our age group and above, because that's kind of where we are, I would say, from a macro, right, from a society awareness perspective. When do these things start to happen on us physically? Is it 20s, 30s, 40s from a science perspective?
yeah, typically, I mean, honestly, I mean, if you look at some studies, I mean, there's shifts in hormonal patterns and drops in essential hormones as early as our 30s, even in a lot of people. Once we hit our late 20s, 30s, and 40s, levels of, like, for example, testosterone drop, growth hormone, melatonin, all these essential hormones start to drop, and the rate depends. I've met some people in their 70s who have awesome levels and they feel good, but like as I mentioned earlier, I've seen younger and younger people. And I think, unfortunately, there's a natural decline. The numbers vary, anywhere from a couple percentage points up to 10% drop, per year, even in some hormones. But that can be expedited or sped up by, again, lifestyle choices, or if someone's not sleeping, eating, Doritos and slamming Red Bulls all day, it's going to be a lot faster. So I am seeing more younger and younger guys. So I always tell guys that are listening, I said, this is not a old man kind of thing. And when you're in your 20s and 30s, pay attention. That's the best time, probably when you're in your 20s, to get some baseline lab work and to kind of document how you feel when you're doing certain things and keep a record. Of course, when I didn't think of that. When we're in our 20s, we didn't think about that kind of stuff.
No,
I could have
no,
told my
not at
young
all.
self that now, but for any younger guys, or even if you're in your 30s, track how you're feeling, what you're doing now, and get some baseline lab work. That way, 5, 10, 20 years from now, you can, when you're doing these, you have a comparison. We'll get guys, we'll check their lab work. We're like, it's not that good, but maybe it has been good for 10 years. We don't know. Maybe it dropped recently. We can kind of correlate it with where they've been or what they've done or what they're eating, etc. But yeah, if I had a time machine, I'd say tell all the guys in their 20s to get some baseline lab work and do documentation of, how they feel, what they're doing, what they're eating, et cetera. And then they could track that, because it's all about the trend, what they do long term. So I
Right.
think the younger you could start paying attention to this, the better.
So you mentioned lab work. So what are some of the key things that you look at from the blood work and any other types of tests that you would want to take regardless of age?
Yeah.
Start monitoring that.
Yeah. Great question. I think the important thing is that I definitely, and what most people should do is treat the patient, right? I mean, I'm not too concerned about the lab work, as if you're having symptoms of, say, low thyroid, even if your thyroid is quote unquote normal, if you're having all the symptoms, well, I'm going to treat you, because just because your levels are high, there's other things involved. For example, what they call, how the receptor is interacting. We have hormone, but it has to interact with a receptor, kind of like a lock and a key to work. And if that receptor is not working, well, it doesn't matter if your hormone levels are good. That's why a lot of the traditional medicine is like, oh, your levels are fine. Yeah, doc, but I'm tired. I'm gaining weight. I'm cold all the time, and I'm constipated. I'm going to treat you, but it's good still to monitor those trends. However, that being said, again, I still like to have a baseline and still correlate that with the symptoms. So I have a basic kind of lab panel that I'll get, and I have a more comprehensive panel. But some of the things I look at are your full thyroid function, and again, like in the traditional medical world, to look at something called the TSH, but that's very incomplete. I will get that, but I also get what's called a free T3, a free T4, and a reverse T3. And sometimes I'll get what's called thyroid antibodies to see if there's an autoimmune condition brewing. Things like testosterone, not just the total testosterone, but the free testosterone, the serum hormone binding globulin, which is binding up some of that testosterone, which actually has some benefits. Things like estradiol, progesterone. We could look at, there's a ton of tests we could do for like adrenal function, cortisol tests. There's most of the lab work we do is blood, but there are some tests that we will get, like, for example, cortisol is great to get with what we call a urine test or a salivary test, or sometimes both, where you actually get like 3 or 4 or 5 samples over the course of a day, and get the trend. They'll get something called the Dutch test, which kind of monitors those things over time and its metabolites. In other words, how those hormones are broken down in the body, and see if there's something wrong with the process. So there's a whole laundry list of labs. I don't want to go through all of them, for your audience will probably be bored, but those are some of the big ones. But we look at inflammatory markers, cardiovascular risk, disease factors, markers of insulin resistance, because insulin resistance and diabetes is, over half the population is pre-diabetic or insulin resistant, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So that's
another growing trend that is unfortunate.
Yeah, inflammation. Everybody's inflamed, so there's inflammatory markers we look at, and that can predispose you to gut issues, autoimmune conditions, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. So we'll look at those, look at all the advanced cholesterol panels, not just the LDL and the HDL, but other things like the LP(a) and the ApoB particles, and many, many more. So there's a big laundry list of things we can get, but you definitely want to get a detailed panel, not just kind of your run-of-the-mill stuff you might get at your doctor's office.
Great. Yeah, no, it's one thing I wanted to point out that you kind of inferred at the beginning was the context of the baseline that, some doctors might use, because you're using like this averaged number of all of society. And that may not be great, because I've heard the term personalized medicine. Like, that's a starting point to
Yes.
kind of be directionally correct, but it may not be personalized to you.
Correct. That's a great point. And I'm getting into the realm of more of working with some other docs right now in terms of doing genomics-based personalized medicine too, not just looking at labs and lifestyle, but also looking into the genomic side. So that's going to be rolling out here shortly too. But yeah, there's individual variation and there's group variation. And thyroid's a great example. Again, you can take a bunch of people and look at where they track and checking their thyroid, and there's X amount of variation. But if you look at an individual, their variation may be really big or really small, different. So you can compare Joe to this whole group of guys, but it can be very, very different. And it's similar to, again, like I was talking earlier about the receptors and genetics, because testosterone is a great example. Okay, the normal range of a total testosterone goes from, say, it depends on the lab, but roughly, let's just say 300 to 1,000. You could be 301 and you'll go to your doctor and you're normal, right? But I always say that's not optimal. We want optimal. And again,
Right.
I don't want you, 2,000 like cranking up like the bodybuilders were, right? But when you're passing your class, you can get A, B, C, or D, and you still pass, right? You want to be a D student or an A student? I want to be an A student, at least a B plus, right? So I want you in that range. So even though it's normal, it's not optimal. And again, there's a lot of genetics involved too, and other laboratory markers. There's a whole genetic thing, what they call a CAG polymorphism, just fancy talk for basically how responsive a guy is to testosterone, for example. And depending on if that level is higher, it'll just how responsive he is. So at one level, a level of say 400, this one guy might be feeling amazing, who's great erections, energy, working outs or killing the workouts. Another guy 400 may feel like crap, gaining weight, tired, no libido. So again, there's the individual variation. You can't it's not just a cookbook where you say, oh, this, we see that a lot, unfortunately, a lot of non-clinicians or, quote unquote hormone experts on Instagram and stuff. And they're spewing advice based on numbers or interviews they've had with doctors or whatever. It's like, there's a lot more to it. It's very nuanced and very detailed, but again, yeah, individual variation is massively important.
Yeah. And it seems too that, and I've heard this with a few other guests, is that personalization piece, that really in-depth assessment. It sounds like you do this as well. Is you need the data points of the testing, but you also need the emotional feeling element of it too, to give the kind of balanced context.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's hugely important. That only comes with sitting down with the patient and really kind of exploring what their options. You can look at their logbook and say, oh yeah, you need to do more cardio. But until you sit down with them, you're like, well, I hate running. I hate this, but I like to swim. Oh, well, we're going to do swimming, kind of thing. Or what do you like to eat? Well, you need more omega-3s. Well, I hate fish. Well, okay, well, we can do this instead. Same with hormones. Oh, this is off, but I don't want to do it this way. Okay, well, we can do it this way. So yeah, and there's definitely, and everybody's different. That's why a lot of people ask, well, what do I do in this situation? Like I always say, well, it depends because there's so many factors, but I can give you a ballpark idea, but everybody's different. Everybody has different preferences, what they'll do, what they can't do based on their lifestyle, maybe religious choices or, whatever. So there's a lot,
So when it comes to the food and nutrient element, are there specific meals that are maybe heavier that would be good for men to focus on, or is it again depend on that nutrient balance that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of variation, but I think in general the easiest way to remember is just to say, look, if you're going to eat something, what would your grandma recognize as food, right? If it just has 1 or 2 ingredients, if it grows, flies, or swims, kind of thing, if it comes in a box or a bag and it has more than 5 ingredients that you can't pronounce, it's probably not a good thing to eat. So, but I think a lot of guys get stuck on, there's a couple of things, of course, back in the 80s, remember where everybody was on the low fat trend, right? And I think that's one danger.
Margarine.
Yeah. I was in that because, I grew up in that household in that time, and my dad has a familial hypercholesterolemia. So he's got a genetic predisposition to high cholesterol, even though he's healthy as a horse, amazingly fit, amazingly healthy. So we went all down that low fat kind of thing. And I was a wrestler in high school, and I was been in athletics my whole life. So I learned from an early age how to manipulate my weight, my fitness, all those things, up, down. And I could change my body composition, on the fly. And I learned that from an early age. And of course, that just got better over time. And now I can counsel my patients. But so low fat was kind of big. And then of course now keto is really big. But again, there's dangers on both sides. But I think one of the biggest things is one, and I hate to say it, but you got to be in the just right spot, right? And, I think obviously we learned that low fat is not good, because if you get below, say 15%, or certainly below 15 to 20% of your calories coming from fat, that's not a good thing, because you need fat for hormone synthesis and, testosterone, your DHEA and all these other hormones. So you need to have an optimal amount. And some guys, and women will do great on moderate to higher fat diets. And some people will go all the way to keto and have a ton of fat. But again, you can have too much fat, and they're not doing well either. They're having constipation, their cholesterol is out of whack, or they're getting inflamed, or, they have some other issues. So carbohydrates are another one. Again, I think carbohydrates have been demonized, and I think people are fearful to eat them. But again, if you eat the right kinds, it's totally fine. You don't eat, a bag of candy or whatever, but have a couple of sweet potatoes, have some rice, have some vegetables and some fruit. So I think for most guys, I say, look, just steer towards a whole food diet. It doesn't matter, if you're paleo, keto, carnivore, whatever. I think, again, there has to be a balance. I don't think extremes are never good, right? I mean, I think, if you do one of those, it's okay, but mix it up. I'm a big fan of variation. I mean, our ancestry is that we ate different things at different times of year, and there'd be times of year we fasted and didn't eat. So I think it's good to mix it up. If you like keto, do it for a month or so, and then maybe switch it up, and then go to a more of a plant-based, lower protein, and then switch it back and go to a paleo. Just keep kind of like workouts. You got to keep your body guessing and keep your body adapting and getting stronger. I know people who have been on keto for years and years, and all of a sudden now they're not doing well, or they had a heart attack or something like that, or, and then they try to switch back, and then all of a sudden they gain all this weight. So I think the easiest thing is just stick with the whole food diet. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of don't be afraid of carbs. Eat them, eat by how you feel. If you like it, eat it.
Right.
But again, I think most people just need to learn to eat, keep it simple, balance out your plate, mostly should be, half or 3/4 filled with vegetables, a piece of protein, a little bit of fat, maybe a half a sweet potato. You're good. Keep it simple.
Yeah. 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 I think it's, I'm paraphrasing, but the Apostle Paul said, all things are permissible, not all things are beneficial.
Yep.
But it's kind of that balance, right? Moderation, keep things in proper context, but don't have a huge plate of pasta with like 4 shrimp,
Yeah. You
or
know,
whatever that
yeah,
looks like.
exactly. It's the same thing with like fasting. Fasting's really big right now too, and I've done it.
Yeah.
I advocate that a lot. But again, you can go people that just they fast all the time, and sometimes, and then they're all of a sudden their health is suffering. And it's like, well, yeah, you can have too much of a bad thing. Mix it up. Don't fast. Actually, eat up or eat more than you do for a couple of weeks. Mix. Change your body. Let it adapt and overcome.
Yeah. Cause I think your body, and keep me honest, can get stale with doing the same thing over and over again. That kind of like you were saying, you consistently do the same thing, it's going to eventually deteriorate.
Yeah, absolutely. You get what's called hormesis. Hormetic stress is just a fancy word for saying that you provide a stressor to your body. Your body becomes stronger. Kind of like when you work out, or say you go in the sauna, you jump in a cold shower. At first, you're like, "Oh my God, freezing! I can't do this." But then you feel good, and it's like once you get used to it, it's okay. It's okay to stress your body short term and intermittently because your body gets stronger and adapts. Your mitochondria start growing, and your stress resilience, you heal. We're talking about recovery, right? Cold shower, sauna, all these things will help you recover, but mix it up, throw it in there every now and then. Don't stick to a bland routine. Then you'll, again, I hate to keep saying it, but like we're working out, if you're doing the same routine day after day for years and you're not getting anywhere, that might be why. Your bodies are very smart. It adapts and it'll get used to things, and you don't want that. You want to keep it guessing, keep it shifting and growing and becoming stronger. You'll get what you want physically and mentally, and you'll recover better.
So we kind of want to take it back a little bit to kind of I'll call it the science piece of it. What are the 2 or 3 things that are generally start to deteriorate? Testosterone is obviously one of them. You may have touched on it earlier, but what are the things that start to deteriorate as we age within men?
Yeah, great. That's a great point. And if I ramble too on, just tell me to shut up because I love talking about this stuff. So I'll go on forever.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I think obviously with men, the biggest one most guys worry about their testosterone, and it is one of the ones that drops, can drop pretty early. As I mentioned early, sometimes as early as your 30s and definitely 40s and 50s, it can drop. So that's definitely one to be cognizant of. Growth hormone is another one that tends to go down over time. And yes, a lot of people will say that, well, that's not a bad thing. People have actually lived longer if their growth hormone levels are lower and this and that. And it kind of depends on context and lifestyle and how they feel. But again, you don't want too high, you don't want too low, but that's another one that drops. Specifically one in terms of, we were talking about, recovering, melatonin is another one that drops early on too. And that's very important for our circadian rhythms, obviously our sleep-wake cycle. And, again, if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering, your workouts are bad, your cravings are high, your stress hormones are high. So sleep is massively important. So that's another one that sometimes gets missed is the melatonin. Some of the neurotransmitters in your brain, like your dopamine, your serotonin, your melatonin, those can get kind of thrown out of whack kind of early too. And they can start going downhill, especially when stress and sleep are affected. So those are ones that, sometimes get forgotten when everybody's worried about, estrogen and thyroid and testosterone, but they're massively important.
Yeah,
And they're all interconnected.
That's a great point, because I just remember thinking when I was younger, my grandmother, she'd go to bed at like 11, up by 4 or something crazy. And I was like, what is she doing? And then you hear other stories, anecdotal stories like that. And that just seems like, is that part of that process as we age? It's not that we don't require, but is that kind of also facilitating the aging process? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Sometimes it can be, as we get older, unfortunately, our sleep cycles can get a little worse. Sometimes we get less deep sleep, less REM sleep, and more wakefulness. So maybe they're waking up early because they just can't sleep. But I think our ancestry is such that, yeah, when the sun went down and got dark, we went to bed. When the sun came up, we got up. It's kind
right.
of and I think we've kind of shifted that with our, our bright lights and our LEDs and our tablets and TVs. We kind of thrown that off kilter, and then wonder why everybody's walking around like zombies, So uh, I think it's important to kind of shift and stay in a normal hormonal rhythm and try to go to bed, when it's dark, maybe 9:30, 10, 11 o'clock, and get up at, 6 o'clock. It's more natural, give or take an hour. So I think the other one, we talked about things like cortisol and insulin. Those are other ones to pay attention to too, as we getting into our 40s and 50s and on, because those can get disrupted. And those are massively important, because cortisol, for example, and insulin, they can affect everything. If your cortisol's out of whack, that affects your thyroid, your testosterone, your growth hormone, your female hormones, and the male hormones, like estrogen and progesterone, things like this, and that can affect everything. So sometimes it's, I think everybody's heard the term adrenal fatigue, what they call adrenal fatigue or exhaustion, and kind of debate whether that actually exists or not. But I think the fact that, again, cortisol spikes going up and down, that fight or flight response is great acutely, but you don't want it chronically out of whack. When you're stressed all the time, you've got a crazy job, you're not sleeping, you're kind of what they call wired and tired. You're tired throughout the day, but then you can't sleep at night because your mind is racing. That's, everything's out of whack, and it has other effects too, right? It affects your inflammation. That's why a lot of people, when they're stressed out, oftentimes over time, eventually they can get very sick, because, why do people get hydrocortisone shots, right? It reduces inflammation. It's an anti-inflammatory. So sometimes after a while, your adrenal glands are like, I've had enough, and it'll drop, and all of a sudden it kind of releases the brakes, and all of a sudden, boom, the inflammation goes through the roof. They get sick, or they get joint pain, they get all these things that happen. So it's pretty interesting how it's all interrelated. So that's a big one to pay attention to. And as well, like insulin, we talked about insulin and glucagon. A lot of people forget about glucagon, but it kind of they balance each other out. As I mentioned, over I don't know the exact numbers, but gosh, at least 50% of the population is either pre-diabetic or insulin resistant. So that's a huge one to pay attention to. If you're not controlling your blood sugar, your insulin, your glucose levels, you're just setting yourself up for, a lot of issues, metabolic syndromes and diabetes and everything. So, but yeah, there's a lot more, but thyroid, testosterone, growth hormone, insulin, cortisol, those are some of the big ones to watch.
Big five.
Some go down and there's a few that go up. So we have to keep an eye on those things for sure. And there's others too. Estrogen is important. But yeah, those are some big ones.
Okay. No, that's great. So you are, as you said, the fitness physician. So when it comes to working out as we age, should we start leaning more to a particular style of fitness, like muscle building or anything like that? That I've heard, as we age, it's harder to build the muscle or sustain it. And then also, I've also read from a health and wellness perspective, fighting off disease, it's kind of better to have more muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, that's why I'm into hormonal fitness and muscle medicine. I'm about muscle medicine. I did a couple YouTube videos on my channel talking about muscle as an endocrine organ. Your muscle is your biggest endocrine organ in the body. It's not your thyroid, it's not your adrenal glands, it's your muscles. Your muscles actually secrete a lot of what they call myokines, which are basically act like endocrine molecules, almost like a hormone, to do various things throughout the body. Massively important. Most people think a muscle is just, I'm strong, right? But no, it's very important. Sarcopenia is a big problem as we get older. Sarcopenia just means as we lose our muscle. Yeah, of course you can lose your balance, you can fall and you can break a hip and then you're going to die, right? That's the obvious one. But our muscles, for example, we were talking about insulin, they provide maximum use of blood sugar, of glucose. It shuttles glucose into the body to make you more insulin sensitive which of course when you do eat some carbs or whatever, you're going to harness them for energy to fuel your muscle, fuel your workouts. People that are not insulin sensitive with less muscle mass, they have more sugar floating around, and that sugar can do bad things to your body and cause disease. So it's what we call a glucose disposal agent, and all these little myokines and that do many things throughout the body. They can reduce inflammation, they can stimulate bone growth, brain growth, and many other things. So it's a massively important endocrine organ. So I'm big on muscle medicine. We want to gain good muscle. So going back to your question about the workouts, I think strength training, weight training, it should be number one on everybody's list. And I think people are getting it. A lot of people, ladies and even older people think, oh, it's not for me. I don't really need to do that. I just want to walk or run. Well, it's fine. If that's your thing, if you love to walk, I love walking. If you love to run, that's great. I'm not a big fan. I don't think long-term, endurance is great for your body or your hormones, but if you want to do it occasionally, go for it. But everyone should strength train because, again, you're going to strengthen your bones to prevent osteoporosis. You're going to strengthen your muscle, which is going to help with metabolism. It can keep your metabolism, it'll help you dispose of glucose, like I mentioned earlier. You're going to secrete all these beneficial myokines and hormones throughout the body, which is going to help your body in so many ways I can't even list right here. So yeah, muscle, I think that should be at the top of everyone's list is strength training. Build that muscle because, as you mentioned, as we get older, it gets harder and harder to put it on. So I think starting as early as you can to build as much muscle as you can that you're happy with, and then try to maintain that as you get older. It is harder to put it on. It can be done, but you don't want to lose that. You do not want to get sarcopenic because then that's just a downward spiral. You want to be strong and vibrant as we get older. It's not just about living longer, but living better. So that's probably at the top of my list in terms of fitness.
Yeah, it's definitely about, the quality, not just the quantity of lifespan, because we do have all this modern medicine. People are living longer, but they're spending, they also on the medical or healthcare side, that's where all the money is too, in the expense perspective. So it seems like if we can catch all this stuff earlier, the byproduct in the next generation is significantly lower cost.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, if someone falls and they break a hip, the cost of the healthcare is, we're in the billions because of, and if you have a hip fracture, almost half of them, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but a huge percentage, like 40, 50%, either die early or they never get their mobility back again ever. You're done, and that's terrible. And diabetes, again, it's a huge billions that is what it's spent on diabetes. And if you could prevent that by optimal nutrition, optimal muscle mass, and keeping your insulin under control, billions and billions of dollars saved. So it's, just to throw that out there, it's not just about health, but, in terms of the health, money, finance, etc., massively important.
Yeah. And so if you wouldn't mind touching on a little bit of the mental side of things during the transition too, it seems like for me, I'll quote my hometown guy, Bruce Springsteen of Glory Days. You listen to that song and
Yeah.
he's talking about, high school and how it was back in the day. I think that's a little bit of that transition when you hit the 30s and 40s is you can't necessarily hit your PRs anymore. They're new kind of PRs on whatever you're doing. Maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm big on the mental game too. I think I talk a lot about like the inner game, whether it's mental imagery, anchoring, affirmations, etc. I think that can be hugely powerful. The brain, it's so untapped. There's so many things that we don't use our brain for. You can make yourself stronger just by doing affirmations, repetitions, by doing what's called anchoring, with a phrase in your head. Guided imagery, professional athletes do it all the time. So, what manifests on the inside manifests on the outside, right? So I think it's massively important to pay attention to cognition and your thought processes, how you think, what you think, because again, whatever you think on the inside is going to manifest on the outside. If you think I'm tired, you're going to be tired. If you think I'm strong, I feel good, you're going to feel good. So yeah, we can't get, be 18 again. But we can push things back a little bit and maintain that sharpness, that cognition, and those mental skills. And in some ways, some of our mental aspects, I think it's better with age simply because of wisdom and experience, right? So
Right.
Again, I think if you can maintain your vibrancy and your vitality from a youth physically, as you get older, you can tap it in with that wisdom of your brain and have the best of both worlds. So yeah, I'm not going to be slamming huge weights like I did when I was 20, but I feel like I can still be pretty strong and pretty fit and maintain that. I maybe have to shift my routine or do some different movements or different types of training, but I can still be pretty strong, flexible, and mobile enough to, I can hang with my 18-year-old on something. Some things I can't,
Yeah.
but it's all about maintaining as much as you can.
Yeah. At least give him a run for his money.
Exactly.
Well, and I think an element of the mental too is even the vision of it. We were talking to touch on the previous point on the healthcare and expectations and breaking hips. I saw this image on whatever social media, and it was a woman on the left, and she's like ripped and jacked at 72, and then there's this other woman who's in like this 90, just kind of hunched over, and it's kind of like which one do you want to be, the left or the right? And like there's this foregone conclusion that if I have predispositions for certain things or whatever, that's just going to happen. Oh, I'm going to break a hip at some point. That doesn't necessarily have to be your future, and now can change that future.
Oh my gosh, yeah, totally. I saw that picture you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. I love that. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like Jack LaLanne, right? You know, he was amazing. You know, I'd love to be like Jack LaLanne. It's kind of my goal. I was trying to do his LaLanne push-up a couple of weeks ago, and I still I can't even come close to what he was doing. And he was probably in the 70s, so that's my goal. But yeah, I think again, going back to, you know, we're talking about the inner game. I think if you choose to be a certain way, you will be that way. Do you I think the whole genetics thing, I think it's powerful. There's things we can do. I talked to you, you know, I'm getting into more of the genomics based medicine, but we can change our destiny, or just because our genes said X, we can alter that. That's the whole science of epigenetics. So we can alter that at least to a point and say, no, I'm not going to be that way. I'm not going to be the stooped over old lady. I'm going to be fit and strong. Damn, I'm going to wear my two piece and sport some guns, you know, when I'm 70. If you want that, you can get it, you know, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want, maybe just take a moment and talk about the epigenetics a little bit, what that is, and how, you know, our genes, we thought were kind of dies that were cast, not necessarily so.
Yeah, yeah, and some genes are stronger than others, and they definitely play a role. But epigenetics is basically how those traits are expressed. So, say you have a gene that says, you know, okay, I'm predisposed to obesity or diabetes, and then so you look back, you know, as my mother and my father got fat and they got obese, I'm going to be that way too. Well, yeah, maybe you have that tendency, but that can be overcome, obviously, to a point. I mean, maybe you won't be as thin as someone else maybe, but you can prevent yourself from getting obese by lifestyle choices. That epigenetics is how those genes tell your body you're going to be a certain way, but you can alter that. That's just what you're born with. The things that interact with that gene, all the things from your lifestyle, what you eat, your sleep, your hormones, all these different things can alter the expression of that gene. So genes, basically your body builds your DNA, protein molecules and enzymes, etc. So how those genes, that's called the expression of those proteins. And then those proteins, of course, become cells and then become, say, muscle tissue or brain tissue or whatever. So you can alter that expression of those proteins by what you do to it. Again, kind of like, you may have a little muscle here, but if you let it sit, it's going to get this big. But if you got a little bicep muscle there and all of a sudden you're doing curls every day, it's going to get bigger, right? So by what you do to that gene, you can change that expression. That's what epigenetics means. And that's become very, very powerful. And again, genetics do kind of push you in a certain direction, but that doesn't mean that's your destiny. You can alter that. And again, it doesn't mean, if it says I'm going to be X height, yeah, I probably can't become 7 foot tall by, doing certain things. There is a limit, but there's a lot of things that are very malleable, very shiftable. Like I said, when it comes to metabolism or your body composition or things like that. So there's some genes, that example, that may tell you, okay, you have more fast twitch muscle fibers and slow muscle fibers. Well, that doesn't mean you can, maybe you can't get super strong, like the strongman competition, but you could still get strong and put some muscle on, but you're just gonna have to work harder at it. That's all. So it's very fascinating how that can be altered and shifted. But yeah, I think don't use that as an excuse that, oh, well, that's just the way it is. I think that's an excuse. I mean,
yeah,
don't let that hamper you. I mean, try. You could shift that to a point.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties in the earlier elements of the conversation at the beginning around, the testing that you do to get an understanding of not necessarily who you are, but who you are from a genetics and blood perspective, so you can understand how things influence you and impact you.
Absolutely.
For example, I'm gluten sensitive, so if I eat certain things, I'm going to react a certain way that may not affect you the same way it does to me. That's a simple example,
right,
of one thing, a piece of bread that affects me one way and you a different way, and that just kind of extrapolates across the board.
Absolutely. No, it's a great example. I'm the same way. It's like, for me, it's like I can't eat a lot of fat. If I eat a lot of fat at one time, my stomach gets upset. It bothers me. So I tend to eat less fat and a little bit more on the carbohydrate side, because that's just what my body tolerates. So I think listening to your body and being attuned to that and learning to make some adjustments is massively important. I mean, somebody be like, oh, I have to do keto. Well, but again, if you're predisposed to something, you can't eat a lot of fat. Well, keto is probably not for you. Try a different way. Try something else. There's always another way, something else you can try.
Great. So what's one thing that maybe I've missed along the way on the conversation when it comes to men's health and really stabilizing your wellness path.
Yeah, I think we hit a lot of points. I think the biggest thing with guys is that, us guys, we don't want to talk or come clean about something. See a lot of guys have, say, erectile dysfunction or decreased libido or whatever, and sometimes they're embarrassed to come in. Women, they've got a problem, man. They're on it. They're talking to their friends and they're getting it. I'm going to fix this, damn it. Whereas
Right.
guys are like, oh, I don't know what to do. You talk to your buddy, hey buddy, how's things? They're good. Yeah, they're good, man. It's that whole male kind of
Yeah.
thing. So
Machismo thing. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is, man, don't be ashamed. If you're, especially guys, just talk. If you've got an issue, if you're not feeling right, something's off, communicate. We can't go down that path until you let us know what's wrong. If you're feeling a certain way, come talk to us. And it's obviously it's confidential and it's private, but I think that's the first step, because a lot of times it's just not knowing or not being willing to take that first step. You don't know, don't ask. Like I tell my kids, you don't know if you don't ask. The answer is always no to the question you never ask. So I think that's the most important thing. Just ask questions. Hey doc, you know what? I've been my brain's, I'm just not thinking the way I used to. Is that normal? Or what's up? Kind of thing. And don't be, just start down that journey. And then that may lead you, oh, this, and it turns out you've got a gut infection, or maybe your hormones are way off, or no, you're not sleeping. Oh, we just found out you had sleep apnea. Let's fix that. Whatever that may be. So I think that's the most important step. Just like anything, awareness, right? If you're not aware of a problem or an issue, you can't do anything to fix it. So guys, just get over yourself. Just talk. go to your wife, make your wife make you an appointment or something. But go in and talk about it, and let's address it, and we'll deal with it. But I think the important message again is just to be proactive. If something's off, get it addressed now. Don't wait 20 years and then find out that it's too late because now you have diabetes, or now your bones are thin, or whatever. Address it as early as you can. And if you're any of your listeners, like I said earlier, if they're younger and you're in your, maybe thinking, if you're in your 20s or 30s and you're like, you got that I'm 10 feet tall and bulletproof kind of attitude, when like we all did when we were young, it doesn't last forever. Get some lab work done, get a baseline, and pay attention to those things. And as things start to change, then you can take the corrective action. I think a lot of people are just kind of like, they're so used to something, they don't realize they don't feel well until they start to feel good. They're like, oh my God, have I been feeling it? I didn't feel this good all these years. I thought it was normal. Like, no,
Yeah. You start to make excuses for things, and some of them are valid. They're, you had kids and sleepless nights or whatever, but that negative compounding interest is going to have a longer term effect on it, not just that temporary, hey, my kid was up 3 times last night.
Right. Hey, and I'm a great example. I'm not afraid to point out stupid things I've done. In the last year or so, I had some issues with constipation, right? We talk about being embarrassed. I couldn't take a dump, so I was having problems with that. And I looked into it, and I've got some things, and kind of like you, I found out that I had a gluten sensitivity, which, I didn't know, for the longest time, I kind of poo-pooed it. But as I had more and more patients having that issue, I started digging into it more. And I found out I've got some issues with gluten. I've got maybe a dairy issue or whatever. And that wasn't the whole picture. There were some other things I had to correct too. But instead of just like saying, I'm not going to worry about it, I took care of it. I actually reached out to a colleague of mine, and I said, hey, obviously, we're healthcare people. Sometimes we're the worst patients, but I put the pride away and just said, hey, what do I do with this? What do you think? What would you do if you were me, kind of thing? And I figured something out. So I dealt with it. I admitted it, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's how you get better. So guys, don't, suck up the pride, and, ladies too. Some women don't like to talk, but get out there and ask those questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I know it resonates with me, and I finally did myself a few years back and took action, and I've been feeling much better over the last few years. So, I can definitely attest to that, taking that action finally.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Eric, I appreciate the time. What I'd like to do is close out with a few personal questions though.
Sure.
So what are you reading right now?
Ooh, awesome. I'm always reading medical stuff, of course, but I like to read a lot of business and non-medical stuff. I'm actually reading a really interesting book called Thick Face, Black Heart. You ever hear of it?
No. Thick
Face, Black Heart.
Interesting.
I forget the author's name. It's Chin Na. I forget. It's a pretty cool. He's Chinese. It's kind of almost like the Oriental version of Think and Grow Rich, but it's got a storied history, a long history, a lot of translations through the years and things. But it's very, very interesting. It's about philosophy and dealing with the business world and personal world. So it's a pretty good read. It's a thicker book, but I barely scratched the surface, but very interesting book. I recommend it if you like. We were talking about the mental game and the insight, your brain and things like that, and thinking about things, philosophy. So if you like that kind of stuff, you'd probably be interested in it.
Yeah, I would be. That sounds good. Hopefully it's on Audible. What are you listening to right now, music or podcast?
I mostly listen to podcasts because it's quite a bit of a drive for me from my home to my clinic. So I either listen to some ebooks or podcasts. So I have my own podcast I listen to sometimes, but I listen to a lot of podcasts. I mean, I couldn't even rattle them all off. I mean, I've got
Sure.
Mostly fitness, nutrition, hormones, health optimization, a lot of different, plus I listen to some business stuff too. But audiobooks, I like to listen to personal growth or business audiobooks. I just listened to a very short little ebook by Mark Cuban, just about motivation, kind of getting ahead in life, etc. And then I switch back to just my normal list of podcasts. So I'll bounce back and forth.
Yeah. That's kind of what I do. And last, what is your go-to rest and recovery method?
That's a good one. One of my favorites is the sauna. I have like a small infrared sauna, but unfortunately I don't get to use it as much as I would like to. So I would say my go-to is meditation. I don't do it as frequently as I should. I've kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit. I'm trying to get back into it, but I try to, when I get up in the morning, take just 5-10 minutes and just meditate and clear my head and deep breathe. And I do kind of more of a standing meditation, like a Qigong or a Qigong type meditation.
Okay.
That works for me. I don't like to, sit. I'm not as flexible as I should be. So I do kind of more of a standing. I'll do some Tai Chi type movements and just kind of clear my head. So if I need to, like, I'm having a rough day, I'll stop and I'll meditate, or I'll just take, if I'm at work, for example, and I can't meditate, I'll do some deep breathing exercises. So that's a go-to that you can do anywhere, anytime. It's free. It's easy. So I try to tell a lot of people to do the same thing.
Awesome. Well, Eric, again, thank you so much for the time. I'll be sure to link in some of the videos you mentioned from your YouTube channel and your podcast, and insights were awesome. So thank you so much.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on, and shout out to all your listeners. If anybody wants to connect, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions about anything we've talked about tonight, anytime, anywhere.
How can they connect with you?
Yeah, awesome. Dr. Eric Primex is my website, and then I've got you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. Dr. Eric Fitness Physician. Primex, Primex is my the company name, but you can find me on Instagram, YouTube, Dr. Eric the Fitness Physician, Primex the Fitness Physician. You can find me. I got a lot of videos out there about a lot of things we talked about.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
Thank you. You do the same.